A very serious matter has emerged yesterday in the United States. And while for a long time I have been talking about how things have been going around the world, and it started off with the Chinese race to reach the number one slot in the world, not only economically but as a superpower. And for that particular reason, it seems that Mr. Donald Trump, for a very long time, has been contemplating on how to change this matter around. Now what has happened is Defense Secretary Mattis has proclaimed publicly that Russia and China have now become not only the enemy, but are on a watch list, and it seemed to suggest that America will not in any way allow this race of China to overtake them. It's a very interesting aspect because it's been suspected for a long time, as the economic power of the world shifted to the east, the Americans have a firm grip on the economics of the Persian Gulf and the Arab rich countries. They have a firm grip on India, it seems, but they have not been able to take China and Russia quite the same way out of the equation. The net result has been that today, with One Belt, One Road, with CPEC and so many other things happening, it now becomes evident as to what Afghanistan's role is to be in the future. We suspected it all along, but basically there's going to be a country totally dependent on the United States, literally another state of America, which in the underbelly of Russia and China will play a very important role in the future, not so economically, but definitely as power play and for various purposes which could also be military. That is why there's enormous pressure upon Pakistan. That is why I find it strange that the Pakistan government has not quite understood what are they being asked to do and whether they realize that the military-related CPEC discussions were what caused a very strong problem for them. But if they oblige on everything without realizing what is the end game, well then they must turn to realize that in the recommendations of America lies problems that will create problems for China and CPEC, even perhaps for One Belt, One Road. So we're talking about the entire vision of Xi Jinping being neutralized in a fashion, and Pakistan would be party to it. I think this is unfair to put us again into such a role. I think we've done our bit earlier and done our bit twice over earlier, and look what we got at the end of it. We have a rather naive ambassador in Washington who says he has been assured that the recent campaign in the United States against Pakistan, which basically come under freedom of speech, well, he has been assured that it would not be state policy to encourage in any way a division or separatism or a particular propaganda war on the aspect of Pakistan's secessionists. Well, if it had to be said, it should have been said either by the president or be said clearly that we will not in any way impede the sovereignty of Pakistan, but it hasn't. It hasn't been said by the president, or it should have been said by the Foreign Relations Committee of either House of Congress, or it should have come from State Department or even the Defense Secretary publicly announced. None of these people. It's only the Pakistan ambassador, I think, padding up his own self and wanting to be safe rather than sorry to say, oh, they've assured us. I keep saying, and then sadly, once again, we see that Mr. Ehsan Iqbal, Minister, has said they should pay for our for refugees to be repatriated to Afghanistan. So the legendary Kachkol or the legendary begging bowl is being taken out again by this government. This is not the way. This is not the way. We should have proclaimed duties and raised our own incomes and negotiated that. Uh, as far as sending the Afghans back, I don't think either Mr. Ehsan Iqbal or the government of Pakistan, who have miserably uh, showed their shallowness in this entire program, have any control over sending these refugees back. The United Nations paid for them to go back, they didn't go back. And similarly, just after all this, and I had warned in my earlier conversations on this page that the way things happened in Geneva or London earlier was a sure sign that Pakistanis are being fooled at every level, and that the real intentions tend to emerge in these sort of things. Well, I believe the government should act and act intelligently, act with the sort of broad vision and deep insight it needs to act on this issue. We keep losing time, we keep meandering, we keep the begging bowl going, we keep assuring ourselves of what will not happen. Well, how many times have we been assured in the past by our own ambassadors or functionaries that this will not happen or that will not happen? And rightly so. The Americans say we never said this. So let's not sit back and get carried away in confusion. Let's realize what is happening. For God's sakes, realize. Even now, if the Foreign Office and their ambassador, who I don't think is worthy of being there, have the gumption to get someone to issue a statement at state level of the people I've named earlier to say that Pakistan's sovereignty will not be impeded. We haven't yet got Saudi Arabia to say the same, despite the fact that we have given a statement upon their sovereignty. Well, it's happening all over. I have warned Pakistan of the consequences. I would be very careful of what I do with Afghanistan if I was in government, because it is not open and shut in any fashion. And with this near proclamation of war, not quite war, yet war with China and Russia, a lot of people tend to say, these statements are made in America and they are normally overshadowed by withdrawals later. Well, why should we wait for that? Why should we think that it will happen despite the President of America's current state of mind? I personally believe that you have to take it for a fact that a curtain of isolation has dropped around the United States of America by their own proclamation. And in the post-Second World War stage, Winston Churchill has spoken about a steel curtain has come across Europe, and now, of course, then they followed it up with the bamboo curtain for China. But what has to be seen that a curtain of isolation has gone up. They are in the process, the way they're trying to pull back their industries with We laugh at the amnesties of the Pakistan government financially. Well, they're doing the same in America, so we can see where the policy comes from, which has dragged back big players like Apple with huge investments to come back to the United States. And certainly, everything is gung ho for the United States. We are not party to that. We can just beat our chests and keep saying, well, we are being victimized, we're being scapegoated. But that's not good enough because your government does everything that does not help that. And I once again say, so many speakers on the spectrum. One voice for Pakistan, please. One voice if you want to be heard above the din. And I keep saying the government and the parliament and the army and judiciary, all of us have to be on one foreign policy line. It reminds me of when BJP's Advani was in New York and he was asked a question which the press thought was contrary to his utterings in India. And he turned around and said, in India, it's another matter. When we're in the outside world, we speak with one voice. Well, that is the one voice that has to be spoken at this level. So here we are. I think we need to be a lot more careful and understand what is happening. The game is not over. It may be a run against China, but it seems quite clear that the old Cold War perspective is definitely in a new way. But a lot of previous old parties are taking cognizance of their relationships with the two communist giants. And I believe that this is why the Prime Minister of the UK got an opening with President Macron in France, where she has promised military assistance to France in Africa, because that is the first ploy. China is known to be not only interested but has invested billions and billions of dollars in Africa. I think it's very clear that this recent foray somehow in defense the European Union could not act minus the UK. And this particular aspect should indicate to you clearly that this is the probing that is going on and what should happen. There it is in a nutshell. I think we have to understand and move accordingly, for God's sakes. Don't be naive, Islamabad. Get it right. You've missed a strong opportunity. You've pulled out the begging bowl. But remember, Mattis's declaration against Russia and China was not just a declaration. It is going back to the old military war machine that was reignited after the Second World War because American financial and economic interests could not function without a war. I will not speak of what happened at the CSIS in 1982 when I was there and what was said about Islam being the next enemy. But believe me, there has to be something happening to keep the machine working in America. And if he's gone so far as to outrage the world on so many issues, including his NAFTA partners, including his Pacific Rim partners, and in the Pacific Rim, they just excluded China and Russia on the aspect of North Korea, with an old alliance being reignited. The game is on. We are part of the game, unwillingly, but we've got to protect our interests. For God's sakes, wake up. Wake up and let's be able to put the situation right for ourselves as well. I think for the moment that is enough. Thank you.